We're diving straight into May 1996 today. And look, we're not just going to rattle off a list of dates and facts. We're going to experience this month for what it really was. A super high-stakes, dramatic narrative of a world that was literally transforming right before our eyes. From the highest peaks on Earth to the shifting corridors of global power, May 1996 was an absolute crucible of history. Let's get started.
Seriously, think about it. What actually happens when the world changes all at once? Let's look at the sheer momentum of this era. You've got shifting global power, heartbreaking human conflict, and this wild new digital frontier all colliding in a single 31-day window. The late 20th century was accelerating, and the events of this month perfectly capture that dizzying speed.
Act 1. Political upheaval and shifting power.
We've got to start in the halls of government, specifically with the immense tension brewing in Russia. As June's presidential election was rapidly approaching, Russian politics was just absolutely dominating international headlines. On one side, you have President Boris Yeltsin. On the other, he's facing some remarkably strong competition from the communist challenger Gennady Zyuganov. The stakes here? A very real potential return to communism. Just a few short years after the Soviet collapse. I mean, the entire globe was holding its breath to see which path this massive nation was going to take.
And the stakes were just as high over in Israel. On May 29th, they held their own historic election, where Benjamin Netanyahu narrowly defeated Shimon Peres. He actually became Israel's youngest prime minister. This was a massive, undeniable turning point. The outcome carried immediate, major implications for the Middle East peace process, sending ripples throughout the entire international community.
Meanwhile, the vibe in South Africa was totally different, but equally historic. On May 8th, their Constitutional Assembly approved a brand new constitution. This document locked in strong, vital protections for human rights, and it actually remains one of the most progressive constitutions in the world today. President Nelson Mandela emotionally hailed it as a foundation for a democratic future. It stood as this incredibly powerful global symbol of the nation's transformation after the dark era of apartheid.
So as all these individual nations are going through these profound internal shifts, the world's leading industrialized nations got together in Lyon, France for the annual G7 summit. They had to grapple with a massive, overarching agenda: global economic growth, terrorism, nuclear safety, and international cooperation. Essentially, the leaders of the free world were urgently scrambling to build a framework to manage a globe that was changing way faster than ever before.
Which brings us to Act 2, the cost of conflict and unforgiving tragedies.
Because while political maps were being redrawn, physical borders were still burning. The biggest world news story of May 1996, the one that really captured international headlines more than any other, happened on May 21st. Dzhokhar Dudayev, the prominent leader of the Chechen separatists, was killed in a targeted Russian missile strike. This single event dramatically altered the landscape of the bloody First Chechen War, fundamentally changing the course of the whole conflict overnight.
His death acted as an immediate catalyst. Throughout the rest of May, even though the fighting hadn't completely stopped, the diplomatic momentum totally shifted. Both Russia and Chechen leaders began pursuing peace talks. They were actively seeking an end to a conflict that had caused just enormous, heart-wrenching suffering and destruction.
Similarly, in another part of the world scarred by recent conflict, peace was actually starting to take hold. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, international organizations began the incredibly arduous work of reconstruction. They focused on rebuilding communities that had been completely devastated by years of war. Infrastructure projects resumed, refugees finally began making the long journey back home, and the difficult effort to heal deep ethnic divisions continued. It was fragile, sure, but it was a hopeful step forward.
Now shifting from human conflict to the unforgiving forces of nature, a harrowing and dramatic tragedy was unfolding high in the Himalayas. On May 10th, climbers made their push for the summit of Mount Everest. But right over that window of May 10th and 11th, a powerful, merciless storm struck the mountain. By the end of May 11th, 8 climbers had perished in the freezing elements. The loss of those 8 climbers became one of the deadliest disasters in Everest's long history. The story of survival, loss, and the sheer, terrifying power of nature completely captivated a shocked global audience. The tragedy gained massive worldwide attention and was later chronicled in gripping best-selling books like Jon Krakauer's Into Thin Air, which, is still widely read today.
110. That exact same day, May 11th, another tragedy struck, this time in the United States. All 110 people aboard ValueJet Flight 592 lost their lives when the plane crashed into the Florida Everglades shortly after takeoff from Miami. Think about that. Two incredibly different environments, the freezing peaks of Everest and the humid swamps of Florida, united by profound tragedy on the exact same day. This immense loss of life totally grounded the nation. The ValueJet crash became one of the most significant air disasters of the 1990s. It was triggered by the mishandling of hazardous cargo, specifically oxygen generators, and this crash actually led to sweeping, mandatory changes to aviation safety regulations. These were absolutely vital reforms designed specifically to protect future travelers and ensure a disaster like this would never happen again.
Moving on to Act 3, the horizon and the digital frontier.
So, if we zoom out from the specific political battles and human tragedies for a second, there was this invisible but completely unstoppable force quietly reshaping the globe. By May 1996, to the soundtrack of screeching dial-up modems, the internet was truly becoming a global force. It was the dawn of a whole new era. New websites, online businesses, and digital services were popping up almost daily. More and more households were suddenly connecting to the web. And over in the financial sector, tech companies were attracting eager investors who were practically flocking to capitalize on this brand new, seemingly limitless digital economy. The world was shrinking and connecting way faster than anyone could have predicted.
Echoes of May 1996. Looking back at this explainer, we can clearly see that May 1996 wasn't just another page on the calendar, it was a true crucible. From the devastating slopes of Everest and the Florida Everglades to the intense, history-making elections in Israel and Russia, all the way down to the quiet hum of dial-up internet connections coming online across the globe, I want to leave you with this question. Which of these historic moments truly changed the world the most? Take a second to reflect on everything we've covered today and keep questioning how the past shapes our present.